Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ideas Hive. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm the branch manager of Ideas for Us. I know I'm not the host you're used to seeing, but the wonderful Lee Perry passed the torch to me for the Orlando Hive meetings. So I'm so excited to be here this evening, learning with all of you and talking about electing climate solutions and how important it is to have this conversation, especially pertaining to this upcoming election. But before I introduce our wonderful speaker this evening, I'm going to talk a bit about Ideas for Us programming and why we're doing this work. So Ideas for Us is a global environmental nonprofit, and our mission is to develop, fund, and scale solutions that solve the world's most pressing environmental and social challenges. Now, this can be a daunting task, but we're able to do this by breaking it down into 3 simple steps. And we're doing the first step right now at our Ideas Hive. So every month we host a meeting and we bring in an expert to educate us on a topic that aligns with one of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they educate us and equip us with the information that we need to make integrative solutions. Immediately after their presentation, we host a think/do tank where we bring the community together to talk about the environmental challenges in our community and how we can solve them. And then we work to plan and organize these solutions and bring them to life. We do this with our amazing group of volunteers and staff members and also partners. We try and work with many different partner organizations so that we're able to really make these integrative and interdisciplinary approaches by bringing people from different backgrounds and different disciplines. And then we move on to our third and final step, implementing these solutions through action projects by mobilizing volunteers for boots on the ground action to combat these climate issues. And this can take so many different forms. Every single month, we host eco-action projects that align with one of our 5 pillars of sustainability: energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. Some examples of these are pictured here. So we have our solar workshop training for energy, shoreline restoration projects for water to help our ecosystems and our waterways be cleaner, tree plantings and ecology to help our soil and our air, waste audits so that people can really acknowledge how much trash we're actually producing and how that builds up over time. And of course, our urban agriculture program through fleet farming and fleet education, trying to localize food systems. We do this because we believe this education and these action projects should be free and readily available to communities around the world. When people know about climate issues, they often want to do something but are unsure what to do beyond their own individual impact. And so we want to give people the opportunities to implement these climate solutions in their community and also have a say in what these solutions are. So if you're interested and you like what you see, please consider donating if you are able. You can go to ideasforus.org and donate, or you can also explore our page and see our many different branches, and you can go to the Liberia branch, for example, and see that they have a cleanup initiative. And you can donate directly to that project, and every dollar you spend will go into cleaning up the Liberia shores. You can also donate your time by joining our eco committees. If you see one of these that align with your interests or your skills, you can donate your time and help us find partners and fundraise and even organize the next climate strike. So if you're interested in that, please visit us at ideasforus.org/eco-committee. We also want to continue this conversation and keep it going all month long. So please tune into our podcast and hear from sustainable innovators from all around the world as they talk about advancing environmental action worldwide. And you can find that on anchor.fm/ideasforus. So tonight, like I said, we're having a very important conversation about the election and keeping in mind climate change as we're voting, and also how important it is to vote, not only nationally, but also locally. We have the amazing speaker here with us today, Dr. Patricia DeMarco. She is such an inspiring and wonderful leader. She has spent a 30-year career in energy and environmental policy in both the public and private sector. She has been a professor of ethics and environmental policy for the past 7 years, and since 2016 has been a Forest Hills Borough Council member, and since 2020 been the vice president. Dr. DeMarco is a Rachel Carson Scholar and the author of Pathways to Our Sustainable Future, a global perspective from Pittsburgh. And we are so thankful to have her with us today. Please leave your questions in the comments. As she speaks, you can put your questions in the comments and we'll pull from there and ask at the end. So thank you again so much, Dr. DeMarco, for being here. I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kristen. I appreciate your introduction and I appreciate the invitation and the chance to talk to your Hive tonight. I want to talk about reimagining America in harmony with nature. We have a beautiful country. I've shown you a national park in Orlando, Florida, and one in Homer, Alaska, which is one end of the country to the other and everything in between. We have the opportunity to reestablish our connection to the natural world as a way to go forward in a new direction. Now let's see if I can, okay. We're really facing three simultaneous existential crises that are connected to each other and that are also challenging all of us in new ways. Not only climate change and global pollution, but also the global pandemic. I'm not done talking about that. And we have not really connected these issues in our daily thinking because they seem so separate. But because we are stressing our natural world so much on so many levels, the very life support system of our planet is under stress, from overpollution, from overpopulation, from burning fossil fuels, and from just not paying attention to preserving the essential things that we need to live. And those essential things that the earth provides us, the living earth, fresh air, clean water, fertile ground, and the biodiversity of species that contribute to the global web of life. When you distress those things, you really are not able to have a viable way forward. And so this is why we have to look at these problems as interconnected and interrelated. They are not things that we can solve one at a time, but if you address them as a collective problem and get to the root problems, the source, then we can have a good shot at solving all of them. So one of the things that we need to recognize is that our current mode of action, this trajectory that we're on for our current policy on environment and climate, is not going to get us to where we need to be to keep in the viable range for limiting global temperatures in the 2-degree range, or preferably the 1.5-degree range of increase over the levels recommended by the international, the IPCC. We've taken the US out of the Paris Climate Accord for now, and we have rescinded or pared back things that make a great deal of common sense, like mileage efficiency standards, appliance and lighting standards, power plant emission controls, even things that industry did not oppose have been rescinded or rolled back. And oil, gas, and coal use has been promoted and subsidized even more heavily and given preferential regulatory treatment. So we're headed the wrong direction to achieve a climate solution that will preserve a good future for our children and for their children. If we want to have sustainability as a goal, ideally you want to look at a situation where the economy and the environment and social and cultural norms are balanced. And then you will have a living earth as a solution. What we have right now is a situation where the economy is given preference and priority in all decision-making in public policy, to the point that the environment and social values are diminished and ignored. Our social safety net is in tatters, and our environmental laws are being shredded and ignored or unenforced. And this is not a sustainable situation. So as we look to go past the crisis of COVID, going back to the old normal is not going to give us a solution. The definition of insanity is to continue doing the same thing and expecting a different result. If we want a better result, we have to move to a different way of making decisions. Let's see here. So we have been exposed to a number of weaknesses, systemic weaknesses in our society as we're dealing with the stress of this virus. The health system is revealed to have strains and be inadequate to the need. Our environment is unsafe and contributing to the illness severity, and there's a huge income equity gap, especially in education, food security, and wages for essential workers, those people that we've deemed critical to dealing with this crisis of the pandemic are way out of line in terms of their pay scale. Many of these people are among the lowest paid in our society, and yet they're considered to be the most essential. This is something we need to begin looking at more carefully. So I wanted to look a little bit at these systems. The United States, among developed countries, we rank dead last. We have fewer practicing physicians per person. We have fewer hospitals and hospital ICU units per person. There were 27.5 million Americans without any health insurance in 2018. And our infant mortality as an indicator of general social health, we've had 5.8 deaths per 1,000 live births compared to an international average of 3.4 among developed countries. And deaths of mothers in childbirth, 30 at 100,000 compared to 6 for the developing world on comparable ways. I think we are certainly no less well off than those in the United Kingdom or Switzerland or France. And so we need to think about what is out of whack in our system. Also, Black people have a higher rate of vulnerability to the virus by almost 2 to 1 to other races. And this is partly because of the environmental justice issues of many of their communities. This is not something that can be explained in any other way. And we need to start looking at the systemic issues that have had these kinds of sequestering of people into places that are unhealthy. And the environment is unsafe and contributing to the illnesses directly. 150 million Americans live in counties that have unhealthy levels of ozone or year-round particulates. And more than 21.2 million people, that's 6.5% of the population, suffer from unhealthy year-round levels of particle pollution. And 2.5 million children and 10.6 million adults with asthma live in counties that received an F for at least one pollutant. My city of Pittsburgh is one of those, and I have asthma, so I can tell you this is true. And the physical environment is also contributing to illnesses indirectly. We arrange our cities for the convenience of automobiles, not people. And our food system is designed for global bulk markets. Our American diet is heavily reliant on processed foods, which are not the healthiest way to eat. And social stress also contributes to drug addiction and violence in our cities. These kinds of parameters are things that are indirectly affected by the environment because we don't plan to have living spaces, have natural features included. We have, sterile, built environments that are not conducive to healthy living. And we have deliberately degraded the environment. The policies of regulatory relief have caused a dip in the, they've caused a decline in the level of particulates, but this has had a rebound in the last 2 years, where fine particulate pollution has started to increase again. We've had 95 environmental protections in federal law rescinded or target for removal. 45 of them have been withdrawn before they were even adopted. Things like the methane standards and the mercury emission standards, things that weren't even opposed by industry, were withdrawn and never put forward to complete regulations. Many of those are now in court. And the federal and some state environmental enforcement has been relaxed because of COVID. Well, this is just going the wrong direction because relaxing enforcement of environmental standards is going to make the pandemic worse, not better. So we need to look at what we're actually doing to our environment on a daily basis in our local policies. And I like to go back to something that Rachel Carson wrote in 1946, which is the year I was born. It says, "It's comfortable to believe in pleasant things. Most of us continue to believe that in our country there will always be plenty. This is the comfortable dream of the average American, but it's a fallacious dream. It's a dangerous dream. Only so long as we are vigilant to cherish and safeguard our resources against waste, against overexploitation, and against destruction will our country continue strong and free." We have 82% of the new construction in our country is for luxury housing, but 30 million housing units have significant physical or health hazards, such as dilapidated structures, poor heating, damaged plumbing, and lead pipes. So we have to look at what is it that we're trying to hold up and what is it that we're trying to accomplish. And this is the chart that I went and checked this 3 or 4 times. This comes from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. This shows that income gains at the top have dwarfed those of lower and middle income households. The top 1%, even in tough times, has achieved a 226% increase in wealth, and that's income after taxes, since 1980. And the middle 60% is way down here at only 47% increase in real wealth over all of that time. The bottom and the middle, the next 19% at least, have covered to some extent the cost of living increases that come with Medicare, Medicaid, and with poverty support. But this 1% has really taken the focus of our wealth increase. People who are working hard every day, paying their taxes, and carrying the middle class are the ones who are barely holding even over all of that time. And if you look at it by race and gender, you see that the people who benefit the most in terms of real lifetime earnings for people born between 1950 and 1954, and you average over their lifetime, the people who do the best are the white men. White women are only about half as well off. So when I graduated from college, it was 59 cents on a man's dollar. We're up to 83 and everybody thinks we should be happy. This is really a very skewed picture of what is going on in terms of how people should expect to be treated. We have equity issues, we have race issues that are systemic and built in to the way we deal with our financial policies in this country. And these things can be changed. These are man-made laws, they can be changed. So what I'd like to focus on as a way of looking at these kinds of issues in terms of solutions is to see that the laws of nature are not negotiable. Climate change will happen because of human actions, and we must change our laws to enable and promote an economy that's in harmony with nature, that will allow us to solve some of these co-linked systemic problems instead of doing everything we can to protect fossil industries. We don't need to go backwards anymore. This is a statement that the United Nations Environment Program Executive Director said when the US withdrew from the climate accord. They said American policy is looking backward to a world that no longer exists. And that is what we need to do. We start to look forward and look at what we can do to live in harmony with nature instead of trying to defeat it. So we're really not talking about a transition. We're talking about a transformation of our economy from one way of doing things to a better way. And if you think about it, sort of the way a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, it's a totally different state of being. You're not going to put, wings on the caterpillar and try to make it fly in a big clunky, uneffective way. It takes all the resources that it accumulated as a caterpillar, reshapes and reforms them into something new that has a totally new purpose. So that's what I consider the pathways to a sustainable future, is look at how we can transform the things that we have, the infrastructure that we have, the resources and skills of our people, and the real wealth of our land, and look at a way forward that would give us a better solution than the conditions that got us into this mess that we're in right now. And there are really three main ways of doing this. Well, four for sure, but going to renewable energy systems, and I'm talking about systems, not fuel substitutions, that will allow us to function on a renewable and sustainable base for energy, to use non-fossil based materials for the things that we use, things that are plant-based, things that can be regenerated and regrown and replaced. Do regenerative agriculture that restores the fertility of the land instead of exhaust it with all kinds of chemical additives, and look at a circular resource management system. Instead of taking things from raw material to trash as fast as possible, we should look at designing things to go into a regenerating, perpetuating system that is a viable way. These are system solutions to system problems. I'll give you one example. There's a group of people in Appalachia, the states that are most heavily affected by the drawdown of coal, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. And they have put together a whole blueprint for reimagining Appalachia that works for us. And this has focused on a lot of really exciting projects, including utility scale solar that is manufactured and built on former coal mine sites, and all kinds of other really exciting things that have the potential to restore a prosperous economy in an area that has been disinvested for a long time. So when you look at how we're going to transform and reset normal to be in harmony with nature, I like to think about the words of Donella Meadows. She died a couple of years ago now from breast cancer, but her words are really very reflective because they help you reset your starting point. People don't need enormous cars. They need respect. They don't need a closet full of clothes. You need to feel beautiful. You need to be exciting and have variety in your life. You need identity, community, challenge, acknowledgement, love, and joy. If you have those things, material goods do not necessarily satisfy those needs. You have to look at how you can find true meaning in your interactions on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how many of you in this COVID period have been kind of forced into a narrower experience where you have to deal with the people who are right around you, the people in your house, the people in your neighborhood, the people that you see when you're out walking your dog. You don't get to see your colleagues, your friends who are scattered all over, and you feel kind of deprived. But the things that give you a sense of value are the things that reward you for being kind, for being generous, for being helpful to people. These are the things that give value to your life. And we have to look at protecting the rights of the living earth. This is something that we have ignored for too long. We have to reverse the primacy of mineral rights over surface rights. I'll explain this a little bit. The laws of our land, our environmental policy laws, have gone back to the 1800s in some cases, where they were trying to encourage development and encourage the Industrial Revolution. So they said, okay, the mineral rights under the ground are separated from the surface. And if you own the mineral rights, you have the right to extract those. And we give you access, we give you below market value on federal land, we give you a way in and out. All of these laws are still in place. So when you apply this in a place like Pennsylvania, I have a colleague who is an organic farmer and had spent 15 years building up a really wonderful, diverse organic farm. And then the Mariner 2 pipeline was determined to go through their land. And this is a private pipeline. It isn't a utility. And they said, well, we're going to put a tap into the gas field right in your farm. And because we own the mineral rights under your farm, you don't have the right to say that we can't. And they've been in court. She put her tractor across their access road and she got arrested. These kinds of things we need to look at in a different way. because the ecosystem services that support our life, the water, the air, the land, are the things on the surface, the trees, the bushes, the ecosystem wetlands. These are all on the surface. And if we are constantly allowing destruction of the land for the sake of accessing minerals without even replacing it, then this is not going to be a way that gives us a life support system on into the future. We have to protect the living earth, the ecosystems that support us, the soil fertility, the diversity of the environment, and the holistic web of life that connects all the parts from the little nematodes in the ground to the creatures who fly around between the trees. This is the thing that I think is the most fundamental environmental policy in America that we need to revisit. And that is this primacy of mineral rights that allows the destruction of the land on a whole scale basis so that one company can make money. This is a situation where a coal company gets the profits and the costs in terms of watershed damage, in terms of loss of the forests and biodiversity, all of those costs end up in the taxpayer. They end up in the public sector. This concept of having the rights of the living earth protected is, I think, one of the hallmark features of our way forward. Healthy people need a healthy environment. You do not get healthy people on a sick land. And so we need to protect and care for the people who are the victims of social and humanitarian disruptions that have been associated with our past ways. And also when we're going forward, if you're saying that we're not going to do a certain category of activities again, you have to take care of the workers who have been in that industry. I know in Pittsburgh, in the 70s, when the steel industry crashed, there was no industrial policy to take care of the steel workers. They were left to their own devices, and we're not doing that anymore. Too bad, so sad. People went bankrupt, they lost their houses, many committed suicide, and they moved away. This is not the logical way to do industrial policy. We need to pay attention to how we keep the communities whole, how you give people a way forward and protect those who have to stay in the same space, but protect their pensions, their benefits, and their health care, especially. Because if you work in the mines for even 3 months, you end up with lung issues for the rest of your life. We have to take care of people and reweave that social safety net so that all of us have a stake in the health and well-being of all of our citizens. And it is our time to choose now. It's within our control to shape how we want the next 10,000 years to go. So in Beaver County, where the Shell ethane cracker plant is about 70% built, this is what it'll look like when it's done. The community came together and reimagined what they would rather have, and they came up with a lot of options that give a diverse and a robust economy that will work better than just the few jobs that go to the people who work in the new refinery. The wind machines that are built in Pittsburgh, solar systems that are built and installed, in our own area, the tourism and fishing and hunting industries that are dependent on having healthy rivers, a vibrant interest in industrial hemp, which can be used to do things like make hand sanitizer. And this is a green chemistry process that doesn't make smoke and fumes like this when they make chemicals. These kinds of things are a diverse and robust industrial economy that we can actually rebuild on the skills and on the capabilities of the communities that are transitioning or transforming into a sustainable way forward. And we need to listen to our children. They sit on the steps, they stand in front of buildings, they urge their universities to divest. We need to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. The research, exploration, production, and processing, we spend over $649 billion a year, every year, in direct subsidies to these industries. And many of these subsidies are hardwired into the law. They have to be undone by law, unlike the incentives for renewable energy, which have to be renewed every budget cycle and are fought over heavily. They're only like 29 to 39 million a year compared to 649 billion. And this is something that we can fix. We can choose to put taxpayer money into things for the future instead of into things for the past. Also, you can put a bottom line tax deduction for people and small businesses to reward people for making investments in energy efficiency, renewable energy installations, planting trees and organic farms, and replacing fossil resources with non-fossil materials like bamboo, hemp, and algae-based products. When this was done in the National Energy Act of 1978, they had a bottom line deduction from your income tax if you did energy conservation improvements in your house. They had a tremendous surge in the efficiency improvements that were done, and the gross domestic product also grew. So it isn't true that when you spend money on these kinds of renewable systems that you lose jobs and you lose money. That isn't true at all. It was quite the reverse. We need to reinvest in our own communities, in workers and local economies rather than multinational corporations. The trickle-down theory does not work. What happens is the richer ones get richer and everybody else scrambles for the crumbs. So environmental policies that look at directly transforming where we put our money, the taxpayers' money, stop putting it into fossil industries and start putting it into things that we want to do instead, and you will find that it grows beautifully. This is what happens when a community decides to invest in a renewable energy system. This is my borough. We had a 1920s fire hall for a borough building, and it had finally reached the point where we couldn't patch anymore, and it was not compliant with the ADA, with the American Disabilities Act, and we had a police officer who was on crutches, who was not able to get to his workstation because there was no room for his crutches to go through the hallway. So over a course of close to 2.5 years of planning and community discussions, we built a passive solar design borough building with a photovoltaic roof on the entire roof. And this is our kilowatt hour bill for the last 12 months. And then it was 6 months before that. You see there's a zero here and the bill is zero. And this is the demand that we have met with the solar power on the roof. We have made more energy than we have used for 24 months straight. This did not require us to raise taxes, and we have increased the use of the library and the in-person service in the building by about 200% compared to the location in the old building. So if we can do this in the little tiny town of Forest Hills, where only 5,600 people, this is a very practical, pragmatic, sensible way to go forward. Buildings that make more energy than they use is a different energy system. It isn't a fuel switch. It's you plan and design for a system that uses a different way of making energy happen. The police guys like to stand there and watch the meter go backwards. It's really fun. So we need to restructure what we value and move toward a circular economy and design for things to be reused. And so that when you're manufacturing them in the first place, you think about what's going to happen to this when it reaches the end of its consumption and use. Where does it go? Well, right now it goes to the garbage and it's not really charged. I mean, you throw it away and the company is no longer responsible for it. A very small amount is recycled. And what we need to look at is to displace the raw material feed by reclaiming the waste and giving it value so that the waste becomes the resources for the next round. And you need to do that by design. You can't just sort of do it. You can't let the market do it by itself. You have to build market incentives. You have to count the waste as a cost and charge the manufacturers for it. You have to eliminate the concept that we need more stuff in order to make dollars happen in the economy. We need more value, not more stuff. things that we build to last, things that we build to have a function that can be sustained over a long period of time. And that includes things like displacing the single-use plastic that is designed to be thrown away. The useful life of a thing like a plastic bag is about 12 minutes, and it's in the landfill for 200 years. Does this make sense? No. So we need to find things that when you have a short life, you use something that can be either degraded into compost or made into something that can easily be recycled and reused into a different form. It's a different way of thinking about value rather than quantity. And this also is something that can be done by environmental policy and law. In places where there's a bottle bill, the amount of plastic bottles in the waste goes from about 1 to 2% to recycled to about 85 to 90% recycled. So there is pending right now by Senator Udall a national bottle deposit bill. And there's one pending in Pennsylvania that's been dead in committee for 2 years. So we need to look at our environmental policies in a way that create the incentives for a circular economy instead of the raw material to trash economy. And we can do this by things like green chemistry. Right now, our environmental regulation takes the risk reduction process and limits how much exposure you're allowed to have. And under this system, they tell you how much you can emit in the air or the water or into the land. And under this system, in the last time we could get data was 5.2 billion pounds per year of toxics were released by legal permit. Now, if you regulate instead to reduce the hazard, so that what is emitted from production processes is not toxic by its nature, then you can actually address the problem at the source. Rather than try to decide how much smoke is okay, you can say, oh, we're going to do processes that don't make smoke in the air. Wouldn't that be a novel way to look at it? So how do you do that? Well, you have to take precaution at the beginning and test for health and biological effects before you approve things for production, not afterward. Put the burden of proof for safety on the manufacturer, not the customer, so that you don't have to sue people to say glyphosate is making me sick and have 25 people do that and be proven right in the court before anybody says to the manufacturer, oh, maybe you think you shouldn't do this anymore. You don't put the genie back in the bottle. You start by looking to see that things are safe before you put them into the environment. And you have to require an independent analysis. You cannot leave it to the industry to say whether their own product is safe or not. Because of course they're going to tell you it's safe and they're going to pay the scientists who tell you it's safe. You need an independent source of determination to be sure that somebody is taking charge of the safety and testing things independently. You need to protect the workers. In places that are making some kinds of plastics, the exposure of workers is 1,000 times that of the general public. For things like bisphenol A, if you have receipt paper that's thermal active and you spend all day handing receipts to your customers, the blood level of bisphenol A in the workers who do that are very much higher than they are from just the general public. You need to look at these kinds of issues before you allow something to be sold. And you need to also test the breakdown products. When you throw it away, does it still retain a toxic element that can then go into the biosphere as things degrade or get distributed through the food chain? And there are 4 ways that communities can capture carbon through land restoration. Doing agriculture in a way that makes more carbon held in the soil, more peat, more organic material, really can revive the land, require a lot less use of pesticides and herbicides, and give you healthier, more diverse products. Also, a lot of people are turning to urban agriculture, some out of necessity and some out of opportunity. I know in Pittsburgh, the Black urban gardeners and farmers of Pittsburgh are a thriving community. They've been farming on raised beds in the middle of the city. They've taken vacant lots and turned them into farms in the middle of the city. And they've brought food and fresh produce to places that are basically in food deserts where there isn't a real grocery store for miles. Reforestation is also a really important thing to do, because after the 5th year of growth, a tree will capture more carbon than it gives off. And as you sequester all of the carbon in the trees as they grow, you can capture a tremendous amount of carbon from the air as well. And then reclaiming land that has been left in destroyed mode can also give you a lot of space for recapturing carbon, and also for just restoring the fertility of our life support system. So you need to place priority on local action when you're looking at these things. I know it's real easy to say, well, we can't do anything until the federal government gets in order, and that would be lovely. And many states are also organized in such a way that, you know, you're really fighting the tide to try to move them. But if you're in a local community, if you get 10 citizens to a borough council or a town council meeting, that's a lot. So if you have an idea that you want to pursue, whether it's more recycling or a local cleanup day or planting trees in your own community or doing anything that you think you want a community solar project, get a bunch of friends and go to the borough council meeting or the town council meeting and make some noise. Start asking questions. And you can really direct how your own tax dollars are used at the local level in a lot of ways that you can't necessarily so directly at the state and federal level. So I really urge you, if you don't know your local municipal representatives or your municipal elected officials, get to know them. They're in the grocery store with you. They go to the library. They walk their dog on the street. I don't go anywhere without having it turned into a 2-hour production, because somebody's got to tell me. Today it was deer, okay? I wanted to run in quick to all these and grab something and come home, and I ended up spending 25 minutes listening to people complain about the deer eating all their vegetables and all their plants. And when are we going to get rid of the deer? And I'm going, I don't need this today, you know? But local officials are much more approachable than other people. And when you do that, you can have community planning. This is the Reimagined Turtle Creek charrette that we did, and they had maps down of the area, and people were putting down their ideas of what they thought they would like to see happen. And you can invest in people rather than multinational corporations. And so we can really, I mean, if you talk to your neighbors and your friends, I'm sure you have good ideas about what would work in your town. What kinds of opportunities do you want to pursue? What do you want to do with that vacant lot? What do you want to do with that building that's been falling down and has been empty? You have ideas. Talk to your neighbors, define your ideas, and then start finding the resources. If you have a plan, it's a lot easier to get somebody to fund it or to pay attention to it. You can build public-private partnerships. You can get grants. There are all kinds of things you can do, but the main thing is to not sit still and complain. The main thing to do is to get together with people of like mind and start making maps. Pull your ideas together and just decide you're going to do something. If you wait for someone else to solve our problems, it's never going to happen. But if you decide you're going to get engaged yourself, you can move mountains. And really, the predominant feeling in our country, 68% of US adults overall think the government is doing too little on climate and the environment. People want clean water. They want clean air. They want their children to be safe. They want to have good food that they know is healthy. They don't want to have things that make them sick at work. We have all the technology necessary to make progress quickly and to change direction. And we need to say things like, sacrifice zones are not acceptable. Not in my town, not where I live, not where anybody lives. It isn't okay that when you live within a mile of a plant and you can't afford to move away, that you're just written off as, well, those people are going to get sick. That's just the price you pay for progress. No way. I'm tired of hearing this. We've been listening to this all our lives in Pittsburgh, and that isn't something that is okay anymore. Sacrifice zones are a devastation to everyone, and they should not happen. So we need to look for the moral commitment to preserve a robust future for our children. Our children deserve a world that can be lived in with joy and with peace. And we're not going to have that if we continue on a path that allows industries to do whatever they please, no matter who they hurt. And really, people have the power to act on climate change. This is the Indigenous Peoples Congress in Cochabamba in 2010 developed the Universal Rights of Mother Earth, and their collective plea to the Paris Accords moved the target from 2 degrees to 1.5 degrees because these people, the people of the indigenous nations of the world, have the least contribution to the climate change crisis that we're suffering. And yet they are, in many cases, receiving the worst of the effects. And this is something that is an ethical problem. It is not a technology problem. We have to own the fact that we are contributing more than our share to this problem, and we have to start taking our own responsibility for the solution. We can't leave it to somebody else. The government-driven investments in the green economy can happen if we demand accountability from the people who are causing the pollution and holding up barriers to progress. We can reward innovations and skills development, and we can focus social protection, especially for pensions and benefits and health benefits. If you consult with the social partners, the unions and the employers, and the people who are affected, and build a healthy environment for healthy people and a planet, these are essential elements of things that need to change if we want to make a better world for the future. These are not rocket science. We know how to do this. And we need to listen to our children. This is the Youth Climate March on Earth Day. Leandra Mira is receiving a Women in Conservation Award tomorrow as one of the women leading conservation movements in Pittsburgh. And I really like to come back to Rachel Carson because she was talking about this since 1950, 1960. Underlying all the problems of introducing contamination into our world is the question of moral responsibility. Responsibility not to our own generation, but to those of the future. We need to really take responsibility for the well-being of our children and for their children. I have grandchildren of my own that I care about a great deal, and I don't want them to live in a dirty world. Every person can take an action. And I share with you Rachel Carson's conservation pledge, and she wrote this when she was about 14. I think we need to look at what we can each do. And one of the things that we can each do is to use our voice, use our vote, and not be afraid to speak up and call for action. When you have people around you that you can mobilize, start at the local level and do what you can with what you have where you are. And you know, Rachel Carson said it so beautifully. I love to quote her in closing comments because it just lifts people up. It says, "I pledge myself to preserve and protect America's fertile soils, her mighty forests and rivers, her wildlife and minerals, for on these her greatness was established and her strength depends. The true greatness of our country is in the beauty of our land, and we need to reconnect to the natural world around us and take courage from it, defend and protect the living earth, which is our only home." So I will stop there, and I thank you so much for your attention, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeMarco. That was so insightful. I love hearing about different things that communities are doing, even across the country, people coming together to take a stand on climate change, and gave real examples of how that's happening in our own country. So thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible. I have some questions here for you, starting with question number 1. How can citywide climate policy sometimes be just as effective as national policy? So at a city level, could that be sometimes more effective than a national policy?
Well, I think national policies can really help to set the tone and to enable things, but so often even national policies actually take effect at the local level. And when you have a local government that is motivated and connected to people, you can actually move things very quickly. So, for example, Pittsburgh has established, by the action of the Green Building Alliance, a 2030 eco district where the community businesses were encouraged to become energy efficient and have metrics and goals that they set themselves. And they've reduced the amount of energy they use, the amount of water that they waste, the amount of trash that they produce, and they have a competition to see who can do the best. And that concept of the 2030 eco district is now spread all over. And it's a very viable way for even sub-community. I mean, this is a part of one part of a city. And now that is being modeled in a lot of other places. I think because you can have a direct effect on the decision makers in a local community, you don't need to go through 5 layers of lobbyists. You don't need to travel. I mean, your community is right where you are, and your local elected officials are right where you are. They're your neighbors. It's not like your representative who represents thousands of people and you may never even meet that person, or your senator, there was only 2 per state. They may or may never cross your path. But your local mayor, your local representative district person, you're going to have a chance to actually go sit down with them or call them on the phone. They will call you back, because you're their people. And if they don't, you know where they live, right? You could just go wander by when they're walking their dog and have a chat. And you'd be amazed how much wonderful stuff can happen around the dinner table. I mean, I'm a great believer in public policy by dinner party. Although you can't do it right now, but we've had, backyard picnics and things where people can really just talk to each other about what matters.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for the community to speak up about the problems that they're facing there, because a national policy is so broad, but a community-wide policy done by your local city council really approaches the issues and the solutions that you need there in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your call to action for people to go get involved. Another question is, how should communities respond when it seems their elected officials are not responding to their call to action?
You have a voice. It's called your vote. If they're not reacting and they're not responding, you've got to go vote them out. And you'd be amazed. I know in my community, we had an incumbent who had been in power for 11 years. And a young lady just out of law school decided that she was fed up. She's had it, and she decided to run. And do you know who got behind her? The high school kids who had been her classmates, many of whom were not even old enough to vote. They went door to door. They made phone calls. They had writing postcard parties. They had sign postings. Everybody voted for Summer Lee. And she unseated a 9-term incumbent. It can be done. All you need to do is to basically have somebody with enthusiasm, with purpose, and is willing to get there and actually represent the people who need to be heard. And really do not hesitate to run yourself. I'm telling you, I was challenged to run by my students because I was giving them this speech. You need to get involved. They said, well, you're retired now. Why don't you run? It's like, oh no, now what do I do? So yeah, I ran and I got elected, but I probably wouldn't have if my students hadn't embarrassed me into doing it. But if I could get elected, anybody can. Believe me, it's not something that is rocket science. You just need to make sure the people who represent you really represent you. And don't just take it for granted that, well, I don't matter. You matter. And if 5 people call a congressman on the same day on the same issue, and they do that every day for a week, he's going to have a staff member on that issue trying to figure out what's going on. Who's over here? The people who screech the most get the noise. And big e-blasts don't necessarily do the work, but a personal note or a personal phone call to your congressman, if you get 10 friends to call your congressman every day for a week, believe me, somebody will call you back because they can't afford not to pay attention to their voters.
Absolutely. And would you say the process is difficult to join local government and actually being a part of it?
It shouldn't be. It varies a lot from place to place, but most municipal governments have a website. They're required to post their agendas as a public notice. They're required to give public access to documents and to actions. And most communities have open meetings, and your borough council or your municipal government will have posted agendas and posted meeting times. And those meetings are required to be open, and they vary a lot in style and type across the country in different places. But by law, they are required to be open processes in one way or another. And if they're not, you should be complaining vehemently.
Yeah, definitely. It's great there is such thing as local government where we can go out and say our opinions and say what needs to be done, and that they have to be very candid about what they're doing.
Yeah, and you can convene a town hall and invite them to come talk.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, Indivisible Forest Hills did that. It's just a community group. There were 20 people. And we said, you know, there are a lot of people running for office. We don't know most of them. I mean, judges, who knows who the judges are, right? And all these magistrates and stuff, and they have a lot to do with, you know, how you get arrested and what happens. So we just invited all of them to come and tell us what they thought. And lo and behold, they showed up. And lo and behold, 148 other people showed up to hear what they had to say. So it was just a group of ladies who decided we were tired of being kept in the dark. And they invited everybody to come. You can do that. You have the power to say to people, you want to represent me? We want to know what you think. Come and talk to us. And if they don't show up, that tells you something too.
That's very empowering. So in terms of this election, what sort of environmental policy are we really looking for in order to advance sustainability nationwide?
Well, I think the first key criteria is, are you dealing with people who believe that we have a problem? Or
Well, let's hope so.
that's the key distinction in my mind, is if you're dealing with people who are denying that we have a problem, and reality is being held at bay, that is the key determinant in my opinion. If you have, you know, elected representatives in the Senate or the House who don't think that climate or environment is an issue, or they talk about we need to get regulations off the back of business, it is not going to help to deny the situation, because this is a global issue. The laws of nature are not negotiable. They don't care whether you're a Democrat, Republican, green, purple, or blue. You need to understand that if we don't stop putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere at an increasing level, we will have a planet that is not inhabitable within a couple of decades. That is not debatable. Nobody in the world of science who knows anything about any of this will tell you that we can continue the way we have been without having disastrous consequences. And we're already seeing them. This isn't something that we have to wonder about. The hurricane season is getting longer and more vicious. The wildfires are getting more intense and bigger and harder to put out. The droughts and the alternating with floods are happening even in inland areas like in Pennsylvania. I mean, we are not going to escape the ravages of climate change. We have to stop doing what we've been doing and reverse direction rather quickly.
And I think that's a good call to action from our viewers to vote in this election and vote with climate change in mind, not only for the president, but for local amendments and people running for office on smaller levels. So we have another question. Can you expand on the environmental policies that have been relaxed due to COVID-19 and whether or not they will be reinforced soon?
I don't know about the entire nation, but I know in my state, enforcement of the inspections of gas rigs has been diminished tremendously much. We only have, I think, 35 well inspectors for the entire state of Pennsylvania, and they're doing about 1,000 wells a year. So you can imagine the level of inspections, even in good times, has been rather iffy. So having these deferred or, put aside has not helped the situation at all. And I know that people have been working remotely. So a lot of the people who work in enforcement have not been able to go to their offices, go to the field and actually interact with people. So that has caused a problem. But it isn't an excuse to allow a disease condition to increase pollution. Is just the wrong direction. It's just the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing a lot of the pollution that was reduced when quarantine started, but then also a lot of the plastic and waste pollution that increased as the pandemic continued. So there's good and bad to everything. Another question is, what advice would you give a young person who's considering running for office?
Well, definitely get a mentor. Find somebody who is in the political arena and talk to them about someone you admire and ask them for help. I had a young colleague who decided he was going to run for state senate, never ran for anything, had no clue, and just decided he was going to run for senate. Well, okay, this was fun, but he's going against a very popular, very well-entrenched senator who was actually doing a really good job for his district. And if he had decided to run the first time for something like council, where there was a vacancy and no incumbent, he would have been likely to win. So you need to look at the whole thing strategically and not go on a suicide mission unless you're just going to make a point. But I think if you're seriously interested in public policy and want to use elective office as an arena for that, I would encourage you to start by volunteering on a local board or commission. There are always things like the Environment Advisory Council, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Hearing Board, the Park and Rec Board. Most communities have a lot of volunteer served boards and commissions that get you into the process. So you first of all get to learn how everything works. You get to learn how the budget happens. You get to have a say in some of these things. You get a standing to give reports to the elected part, and you get to see where the vulnerabilities are and where the opportunities are, but it gets you in the door. And then you can run after you have a little bit of experience with that sort of thing. I would also recommend that you, if you're interested in running for office, get to know your neighbors, your future constituents, write a blog, talk to people, get your name out there, write op-eds to the paper, get your name out so that people know who you are and know what you stand for. And then when you finally decide to run, they'll say, oh yeah, I know that guy. I read his stuff all the time. And you need to have a way for people to know who you are. And the bigger your community, the more important that is. If you're a teacher, you automatically have students. This is great. If you're not a teacher, go talk to somebody's class. Go talk to the civics class in your high school. They're going to be future voters. And get to be useful. So if you're volunteering in your community, you get to know the community, you get connected to it, and you get a name.
Awesome.
It's a great place to start.
Sorry, yeah, that's a great call to action. Another question is, what do you believe is the best way for us to get involved in our local communities?
Your local community, first of all, you know your community better than I do. So find some issue that you care about and become an advocate. I mean, maybe you have a stream that needs to be daylighted. Maybe you have a local park that needs to be spruced up and taken care of. Maybe you have pedestrian access issues. It's going to differ for every community, and I don't know what your issues are. In my community, we have a big push going on right now for walkability. A lot of people are working from home because of COVID, and the sidewalk situation in my town is pathetic. It's worse than pathetic. It's hazardous in a lot of areas. So we've gotten a bunch of people together trying to put pressure on improving the walkways and the sidewalk maintenance, and putting sidewalks in places that are, popular to walk on that don't have one at all.
Mm. Yeah, and I think I want to build off a little bit on that. Also joining even ideas for us eco committees. We work to identify local problems and then take in volunteers to help us kind of find ways to solve those locally. But even more than that, visiting your local government, like you said, Dr. DeMarco, and really saying, hey, this is a problem. And we, the people, we say that we want you to do something about that.
Yeah.
So really utilizing the voice that we're so lucky to have here in the United States, and using media and writing blogs and getting your voice out there. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. DeMarco. Those are some great ideas. Another question is, how can young people who feel left out of the political system be encouraged to vote?
Well, like I said, Summer Lee got elected because of her high school classmates, people who, like, her cousin was the drum major in the high school that she graduated from, and the kids got involved in getting her elected. Find a candidate that you care about and go work for them. You can canvass, you can write postcards for people, you can phone bank, you can text bank. If you get involved in a campaign, first of all, you meet all the people who are active in that sort of thing. You meet other people who feel the way you do, and you also develop a vested interest in the outcome of the election, and therefore you're more likely to vote and get your friends to vote. I mean, I got involved in politics when I was campaigning for John F. Kennedy. I wasn't even old enough to vote when he got elected. But my girlfriend and I we were Kennedy High Hope girls, and we handed out literature and we knocked on doors, and we sang at campaign rallies, and that's what you have to do. If you care about something, you will find other people who think the same, and you can make a big deal out of it.
Wow.
Go to candidate forums and ask them questions. The power of a young person. I mean, Leandra Mira, when she was still in high school, she would go to all these candidate debates and she would put up her hand and she would sit there. What are you doing about climate change to make my world safe for my children? I mean, how do you answer a person like that? You have to have a lot of courage to say, oh, that isn't an important problem. When you have an outraged teenager in front of you demanding answers, there's nobody more positioned to demand action on environment issues than teenagers. And I really applaud all of them who are out there making their lives miserable for their parents who are trying to pretend there's no problem, because there's nothing more persistent than a passionate teenager. Believe me. They can
Yeah.
move the mountain, and they will.
For sure. The Fridays for Future movement is a great example of that.
Yes.
How it started with just Greta, and now it's moved into this giant movement that's expanding globally. So young people should use their voice because it's loud.
Yep. And they should make sure everybody they know votes the right way. I mean, if you're a young person and you're not old enough to vote, and you have people around you who are old enough to vote, you better find out, how are you planning to vote and why aren't you voting the way I think you should be? Because I need somebody to care about my future. And, I don't know, when I was a teenager, I was always in bad trouble because my uncles were all engineers and I was sitting there fighting for clean air and they were all sitting there. They worked for PPG and US Steel. And I'm sitting there saying, but the air stinks and I don't like it. And there's like, that's the smell of money. Going, if that's what it smells like, I don't want any. But teenagers are very powerful forces. Just use that force for good.
Yeah, and it's important to come together cross-generational and have these conversations, especially as we're approaching our election in November. These conversations can sometimes look ugly, but as long as you approach them with an open mind and you're willing to learn from one another, they're essential to have. And so I think we encourage it. So another question is, if you are new to a community, what is the best way to get involved as we are through the middle of coronavirus? So getting involved during this pandemic, how can that look?
Yeah. Well, it's really hard when we're in Corona because you can't do person-to-person things. So again, I don't know if you have a local newspaper, read the paper, write a letter to the editor. If you have like a social media neighborhood, like we have neighborhood next door, you can often find people who are close by, have common interests. Like one of my neighbors organized a scavenger hunt for children where people posted things in their doors as pictures for the little kids to find. And it brought a lot of people together who never knew each other because the little kids were running around looking at everybody's doors. And we had backyard visits where people who were new to the neighborhood were introduced into the backyards by just we had backyard parties where you're all around the edges. You're not close to each other when you're all wearing masks, but at least you all go around and say your name and say who you are and welcome people to the neighborhood. So you can hold one if you're new to the neighborhood and don't know your neighbors. Say, come by and say hi. You know, it's a little harder in these COVID times, but I think it's really important that we not isolate ourselves completely, especially to our neighbors, because if you have elderly people in your neighborhood, they're going to need someone to reach out to them sometimes. And we need to be aware that we're more alike as human people than we are different in gender or culture or race or anything. It's really important that we remember our common humanity, and the things that make us human are also the things that make life delightful.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. And sometimes it only takes a group of neighbors to change a city council's mind about something and
Absolutely.
implement
Mhm.
those policies. Awesome. Well, I think that's it for questions for now, but thank you so much, Dr. DeMarco. This was such a
Welcome.
wonderful learning experience. You've given us so many great ideas. It was great to have your perspective, a global perspective from Pittsburgh, may I say, the
Yeah,
title of your book.
my book. And you can go to patriciademarco.com. I have a blog, and I'm kind of late posting my blog post this month because I've been working on Reimagine Appalachia, but it's just my name, patriciademarco.com. And
I think I have it right here.
yeah, there you go. And if you want to put a comment or a question or get in touch with me, that's the best way to do it. There's a contact page on there. So I thank you so much for the invitation to be with you this evening, and I wish you all the best. Please keep in touch and let me know how you are.
Thank you so much. And yes, please check out her book. It's very insightful. I'm very excited to read it myself. Pathways to a Sustainable Future, a Global Perspective from Pittsburgh. And check out her amazing podcast and more information on her website because she's just a wonderful speaker, as you all know, and has a lot of insight to add. So now we're going to talk about us locally. Here in Orange County, we have some important amendments and charter questions that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first one is charter question number 1. We really encourage you all to vote yes. And you can read more about that on righttocleanwater.com. But voting yes on charter question 1 will prohibit polluting the Wekiva River, the Econlonhatchee River, and all other waters in Orange County. And I think we all want a right to clean water. So it's really important that you educate yourself on the wording and what exactly these amendments and charter questions are trying to accomplish. And we encourage you to vote yes on charter question number 1 and amendment number 2, as that will serve to save split oak forest. If you don't know what split oak forest is, it's an endemic ecosystem that is home to many keystone species and ecosystem services that are essential to us in Orange County, and it is at risk as they want to develop a toll road right through the middle of it, pretty much to nowhere. And so voting yes on Amendment 2 will work to save split oak forest, and you can learn more about that at savesplitoak.org. And if you want to get involved, you can email savesplitoak@gmail.com. And you can also educate your friends, family, and neighbors by picking up a sign encouraging them to also vote yes on Charter Question 1 and Amendment 2. You can email Lee Perry or message our Facebook, lee.perry@ideasforus.org, as I think she has quite a lot of them. So we would love to have you all educate our communities about this as well. So our upcoming eco action projects we're going to give you the ability to implement these climate solutions in our community this month, but we do have lower capacity for COVID reasons. So please RSVP as soon as possible. This Saturday, we're having a shoreline restoration project with Stalking Savvy, where we're going to learn about these native water plants and how they're helpful, and also plant them right in the ground. And then next weekend, we're having a tree planting with Quest Inc. From 2 to 4 on October 16th. These were donated by One Tree Planted, and they also donated tree plantings to our Liberia, Nepal, and Uganda branches as well. So we're so thankful to them, and we're excited to plant some trees in our community. Same situation, you must RSVP because we have a limited number of spaces, and we will all be wearing masks. So, but please come out and get involved as we want to continue implementing these climate solutions. You can also help educate your community with Senator Linda Stewart on the Safe Split Oak Amendment. They're doing a literature drop, which is basically a canvassing where you go to neighborhoods and drop off literature, educating people on why it's so important to safe split oak forests and vote, but you can do that by voting yes on Amendment 2. So you can learn more about that as well as our other events on our Facebook event, on our Facebook page. And we have some pop-up plant markets with Fleet Farming, one on October 24th, and another one on Halloween. It's only $10 a person, and also Best Costume gets a $20 certificate for free plants for veggies at our farmers market in fall. So you can dress up and take home free plants with every ticket sale, and Ideas members get to attend and receive a plant for free. So come out and dress up and we'll have a great time. And then next month, we have a very special hive that we're celebrating. We are celebrating 100 consecutive hives for our November hive. And this means 100 months in a row, we have educated the community on the climate crisis and also implemented solutions locally, not only here, but all around the world. But our Orlando Hive is celebrating 100 hive meetings. And so that's quite a record to celebrate. So we want to celebrate with all of you. We're having some giveaways and some campaigns on social media. We wish we could celebrate in person, but this is the next best thing. And we will be talking about solving the climate crisis with renewable energy with Gordian Rake, the founder of Renewable Energy Long Island. And he is very inspirational because he breaks it down into an individual level and then a community level, or how you can organize your community into transitioning to renewable energy. So that will be November 4th. And then last month, we did the entire month focusing on food. And so the last hive, we had the wonderful Jennifer Waxman talk about local food systems and how it's so important to have organic and innovative ways to grow food locally. And so please check that out on our Facebook so you can learn more about how Villages Grown is really making this innovative progress, as well as listen to Dr. Brooke Hansen talk about climate and food justice. It's so easy to disassociate how your food was grown and who picked your food when you're eating it, but it's really important to remember this because the climate injustices that are happening in our own country are heartbreaking. And so acknowledging that and doing your best to combat that is so important. So please listen to that on our Facebook page, and as well as the benefits of fungi from Taylor Bright. It's so cool to learn about real life examples of symbiosis in nature, and fungi embodies that so well. So you can learn about nature and get excited about that with Taylor. And also our Drink Beer Talk Climate Local Food Systems Edition. You can learn about growing local food, composting local food, and how it all works in your Orange County community. And so all of these videos are still on Facebook. That's what's great about taking an online position, because you're still able to see everything that happened last month. And so you can continue to learn about our local food systems. We also had an amazing event as we marched down the streets around East End Market, and we planted pollinator plants in our raised beds there. Even as we were doing this, a butterfly came to say thank you, which I thought was such a beautiful symbol of how living in harmony with nature is really possible, and having a human and wildlife interaction is so possible if we make the space for them. And so that was a wonderful event. Thank you to everybody that came out, and thank you to Native Plant Society, Tarflower Chapter, and the Central Florida chapter of Sierra Club for partnering with us on that. If you all would like to learn about gardening, whether you're in Florida or anywhere in the country, you can sign up for a one-on-one virtual consultation via our website. This will be with Lee Perry, and she will teach you about how to properly grow your food and maintain your soil. A $30 donation is encouraged for the service, but not essential. But please reach out to her if you're interested in that. You can visit fleetfarming.org, Fleet Education. We also have our edible landscape services back and running. So if you're interested in any of these services, please check out our Fleet Farming /edible landscapes website. They can offer so much. Turn your backyard into a permaculture sanctuary, or even educate your school on local foods. So please check out that if you're interested. And I want to thank you all so much for being here today and committing some of your time to implementing these solutions and learning about climate change. So thank you, everybody. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out our website, our social media pages. And please, once again, I want to encourage all of you to vote, because as you know, we are in a situation that we may not be able to turn back from if we don't do something now. So keep that in mind as you vote this November, and I'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody.